Imagine a small nation of merchants and traders defeating the most powerful empire on earth. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But in the 17th century, the Dutch Republic did exactly that, and their secret weapon wasn't steel or gunpowder, it was money itself. The year is 1568, and the 80 Years' War has just begun. On one side stands the mighty Spanish Empire, controlling vast territories across Europe and the Americas, fueled by endless streams of silver from the New World. Their military dominance seems unshakable. On the other side, a collection of rebellious Dutch provinces fights for independence. They're outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with resources that dwarf their own. By every conventional measure, the Dutch shouldn't stand a chance against this imperial giant. Yet they did. So how does a scrappy republic of merchants survive, let alone triumph, against such overwhelming odds? The answer lies not on the battlefield, but in something far more innovative, a financial revolution that would change the course of history and reshape global power forever. To understand this transformation, we need to grasp just how massive the power gap truly was. Spain controlled an empire where the sun never set, extracting enormous wealth from colonies stretching from Manila to Mexico City, and their armies were feared across every continent. Meanwhile, the Dutch Republic was essentially a swampy corner of northern Europe with limited natural resources and a fraction of Spain's population. Traditional warfare seemed hopeless, so the Dutch did something unprecedented. They built a financial system so sophisticated that it became their greatest strategic advantage. Here's where the story gets fascinating, because the Dutch created financial instruments that simply didn't exist anywhere else. In 1602, they established the Dutch East India Company, known as the VOC, and it became the world's first publicly traded corporation with shares anyone could buy. This wasn't just a clever business model, it was revolutionary. By selling shares to the public, the VOC raised massive capital that no single merchant could provide alone. Suddenly, ordinary citizens could invest in overseas trade and share in the profits, creating a broad base of financial support. And the VOC wasn't merely a trading company sitting on the sidelines. It actively fought proxy wars against Spanish interests across Asia, attacking their ships, seizing their colonial outposts, and disrupting their lucrative spice trade. The company became a weapon of economic warfare in disguise. Then in 1609, the Dutch established the Bank of Amsterdam, another groundbreaking institution. This bank stabilized currency, facilitated international trade, and provided a reliable foundation for credit. It made Amsterdam the financial heart of Europe, attracting merchants and capital from across the continent. But perhaps the most crucial innovation was the Dutch mastery of public bonds. The Republic developed a taxation system, particularly excise taxes, that was efficient and widely accepted. Citizens trusted their government, and that trust translated directly into their willingness to lend money at remarkably low interest rates. This public confidence was everything, because wars are staggeringly expensive. The Dutch government could issue bonds knowing that investors believed they'd be repaid. As the war progressed, the Republic even managed to refinance existing debt at significantly reduced rates, slashing their borrowing costs when they needed it most. Think about what this meant in practical terms. The Dutch could raise funds quickly, deploy them efficiently, and sustain military operations year after year without collapsing under debt. They had created a perpetual money machine that turned citizen confidence into military power, and it worked brilliantly. Now let's contrast this with Spain's situation, because the difference is staggering. Despite all that silver flowing from the Americas, the Spanish financial system was fundamentally broken. The crown's revenues depended heavily on irregular shipments of precious metals, creating unpredictable cash flow and chronic budget shortfalls. Worse still, all that silver caused rampant inflation within Spain itself. As more precious metal flooded the economy, prices skyrocketed, and the real value of tax revenues eroded rapidly. Spain's wealth was literally losing purchasing power faster than they could spend it, creating a vicious economic cycle. The Spanish taxation system made matters even worse because it was inefficient and deeply unfair. Peasants bore the heaviest tax burden, while powerful nobles and the clergy enjoyed broad exemptions. This created resentment, reduced productivity, and failed to generate the revenue the crown desperately needed for war. King Philip II faced an impossible dilemma. His expenses vastly exceeded his income, forcing him to borrow enormous sums from bankers. But here's the catastrophic part. He declared bankruptcy not once, but 4 times between 1557 and 1596, completely destroying creditor confidence. Each default sent shockwaves through financial markets. Spanish interest rates skyrocketed because lenders knew they might never see their money again. By the early 17th century, servicing existing debt consumed nearly half of the crown's entire annual revenue, leaving almost nothing for military operations or governance. So even though Spain technically had access to vast wealth, their financial dysfunction meant they couldn't effectively mobilize it. The Dutch, meanwhile, with far less raw wealth but infinitely better financial infrastructure, could consistently outspend Spain where it mattered most, on the battlefield and at sea. The consequences of this financial disparity became brutally apparent in how each side maintained their armies. The Dutch could pay their soldiers reliably and on time, maintaining morale and discipline. Spanish troops, however, often went months without wages, leading to devastating breakdowns in military effectiveness. Unpaid Spanish soldiers didn't just grumble, they mutinied repeatedly throughout the war. These weren't minor incidents, but major breakdowns where entire regiments refused orders, deserted, or even sacked cities they were supposed to protect. The famous sack of Antwerp in 1576 was carried out by mutinous Spanish troops. Geography compounded Spain's problems because they had to move troops and money across vast distances using the notorious Spanish Road. This overland route stretched from Italy through the Alps and into the Low Countries, and it was slow, expensive, and vulnerable to disruption at every turn. By the time Spanish silver and soldiers reached the Netherlands, months had passed, costs had multiplied, and the tactical situation had often changed completely. The Dutch, fighting on home territory with reliable financial backing, could respond rapidly to threats and exploit Spanish delays with devastating effectiveness. Meanwhile, Dutch economic prosperity created a virtuous cycle that Spain simply couldn't match. As the Republic's wealth grew, it attracted skilled Protestant workers fleeing religious persecution in Spanish-controlled southern provinces. These refugees brought expertise in textiles, finance, and craftsmanship, further strengthening the Dutch economy. Spain's troubles multiplied because they weren't just fighting in the Netherlands. They were simultaneously engaged in costly conflicts against England, France, and the Ottoman Empire, spreading their already strained resources impossibly thin. Every front demanded money they didn't have and troops they couldn't pay reliably. The climax of this economic warfare came in the early 17th century. Dutch financial strength allowed them to build a powerful navy and dominate crucial trade routes, while Spanish military capacity continued its steady decline. Key victories at sea weren't just tactical, they were economic, cutting Spain off from vital resources. By the time the Treaty of Westphalia was signed in 1648, ending the 80 Years' War, the outcome was clear. The Spanish Empire, once seemingly invincible, had been worn down not primarily by military defeat, but by financial exhaustion. They simply couldn't sustain the economic burden anymore. The Dutch Republic, meanwhile, emerged as a major European power and the commercial hub of the world. Amsterdam became the center of global finance, and Dutch innovations in banking, stock markets, and public credit became the blueprint that other nations studied and copied for centuries. The legacy of this financial revolution extends far beyond one war. The institutions the Dutch created, publicly traded companies, central banking, liquid bond markets, formed the foundation of modern capitalism. Every stock exchange, every government bond, every corporate share traces its lineage back to Dutch ingenuity. So here's the enduring lesson. Raw wealth alone doesn't guarantee victory. What matters is how effectively you can mobilize and deploy financial resources over time. The Dutch proved that sophisticated financial systems can be the ultimate weapon, more decisive than any army or empire.